I'm Dr. Jaime Module. Welcome to part 3 of the course, If You Want to Fly Higher, You Must Be Lighter. And this is module 11, the big F word, forgiveness. It's a big issue, and so there's an image, a quick story. I'll have a few quick stories about the significance of forgiveness. And it's that there's this teacher with a group of students, and he has a big glass jar and a bunch of rocks around the table, and he asks the students if they think all those rocks will fit, and it really doesn't look like they will. So he puts in the big rock, a couple of real big rocks to nearly fill the thing, and said, "Now, is it full?" And it looks full. He says, "Okay." So he takes the next, pebbles, and he puts that in, and those slip into the spaces that are available, and asks the class again, "Is it full?" And they say, "Well, yeah, it is full." And it looked like it was as full as it could be. And then he took some gravel and put that in, and that seeped in between in the spaces. And then took sand and put that in. And when it looked like it couldn't take any more, it poured water in. And so the significance for me of that image is that if we start with the big pieces first, then we actually have more space. We can do a lot more things than we thought. And forgiveness is one of those big things that we really need to attend to. I was in the audience of the show 200 Men some time back with Oprah, and the topic of forgiveness drew lots of people crazy. And so in a minute I want to talk about what it is and what it isn't. But before I do that, I want to give you another couple of images. Gandhi said, "An eye for an eye makes the whole world blind." And there's a story of a genie who appears to this person and says, "I'm going to grant you a wish. And you can have anything you want. Anything, just imagine, whatever it is. But the only condition is that your neighbor gets twice as much of whatever you wish for yourself." And so the person, hates his neighbor. So it's agonizing to think if he asks for all the money he can possibly have, the neighbor's going to have twice as that. Or all the power the neighbor's going to have twice, and on and on. And the person is so frustrated and so focused on his neighbor and how much he hates the neighbor. He comes up with his wish, which is, "Genie, I want you to put out one of my eyes." And that's a really awful, crazy image, but that's related also to this big issue about forgiveness, because a lot of times we think it's about the other person. We want to focus on having that person to recant or make amends or change all kinds of things or give us back something. And that's misplaced. That's not forgiveness. That was kind of the case with the men in Oprah and many others. That we think that forgiveness is somehow them doing something. And Oprah had a little definition. She said, forgiveness is when we give up the illusion that the past can be anything different than what it was. That's a real different slant. And the slant, the focus that I want to hold on to for us is forgiveness is for giving. It is for us. And the forgiveness, that's a real important starting point, is that we start to forgive ourselves, that we start to let go of what we've been holding on to that keeps us stuck. And so let me say that, that opening prayer or poem with Marianne Williamson, that as we let our own light shine, that we unconsciously give others permission to shine, and Gandhi's "Be the change that you want to see in the world." All those things are about us getting freed up, us letting go of what keeps us down or stuck or depressed or just focused on negative. And so forgiveness is, I'll just say, an incredibly important step, a foundational step in being more aligned with who we are. In this set of modules, in part 3, we're talking about being a survivor-thriver. Victims, I don't think, could focus on forgiveness because victims are so focused on the damage and the pain and the reliving trauma and so on. Survivors may shift from being in that trauma in the moment to reacting. Instead of being in the fight-flight mode, being in this very reactive mode. And still focused on whatever reminds us of the perpetrator or those who have harmed us. And so survivor-thriverhood is really this transitional place of being in the here and now, self-managing, taking care of ourselves, regardless of what others do for us or think of us, that we take care of ourselves. And so part of that self-care is to let ourselves off the hook from what we've been carrying. I'll just say forgiveness is letting go of the past. Forgiveness is for us to be freed up to receive. Forgiveness is not reconciliation, the R word. Reconciliation is often confused with forgiveness, and reconciliation is really about the other person taking some steps to recognize what they've done, apologize, make amends, change behavior, be accountable, all those things. So forgiveness can be for us something very freeing without needing to say that what happened was okay, to say that it doesn't matter, and none of that. Years ago, someone tried to assassinate a pope, an earlier pope, and that person went to jail, and then years later the pope went to visit that person in jail. The pope never said, I want the Italian government to put this, let this person out of jail. He said, I forgive you, but he didn't say I release you from jail. So there are natural consequences. So that, again, forgiveness is on our part. We don't get stuck. It's not about approving. It's not about minimizing wrongful actions or releasing other people from accountability. So I hope that's helpful enough to start with. Another image of forgiveness is a big hourglass. If you can think the top part full of sand, and then it narrows, and then it expands again. Some people use that image to talk about us and our makeup, our physical, our kind of intellectual, and then our spiritual self, with the top being the physical world that we are in contact with all the time, our external environment, the way that influences us, our bodies, and so on. And so those are very real for us. We carry all kinds of experiences and celebrate a lot of things because of that. We also can suffer and feel stuck because of a lot of those things as well. In the narrowing part, we have the world that we live in our heads. The memories, the things that we've learned to do quickly, to survive, to make quick judgments, and those are all important. Those are all good, and they kind of boil down to our ego as well, the judger, the discerner of all the things that we perceive. And then that leads us to that very narrow point where everything bottlenecks, where everything is stuck. And so that bottom part leads then to this spiritual self. Some people call our subtle self, our causal self. So physical, subtle, mental, intellectual, and then causal. Our soul, starting with individual, and then connecting with others, the collective, and then even bigger, this infinite, the universal, the divine. All of it's divine in a more expansive way. Forgiveness, in my mind, is taking that middle section where things bottleneck and expanding it. The more we can let go, not again of the accountability and what wrong that was done, but let go of our holding on to it, what we've internalized, then that middle section can be freed up and we can have more of this life flowing in us. So I know that forgiveness is really about ourselves from my own experience. When I was at a really, just a point of desperation where everything was affected. My relationship, my work, my mental health, my sleep, my presence to myself. Everything was not working. Everything was falling apart. Everything was in turmoil. And I went through a process of identifying the things that were really painful and identifying how those things had impacted me. And then identifying how those same things I had internalized, and then how I had impacted others. And so I realized that I was abandoned, abused, and then wrapped in shame, but that I internalized that. And so far after the abuse, far after anybody involved with that in growing up years was around, I was still internalizing that I abandoned myself, that I had done things that were kind of abusive in the name of good or just in the name of escape to myself, and I'd been wrapped with shame so that nothing was ever good enough. And that in turn was something that I offered to others without realizing it or wanting to do that. But I had caused harm by not being present to others, people I love, people I worked with, people I cared about. Been abusive in different ways, demanding perfection, demanding more than people could possibly live up to. And also then shame, sharing that shame with others. And that's when I really realized that I needed to forgive myself. because I had internalized that kind of warped thinking and feeling about myself that I had passed on to other people. And if I could be then compassionate with myself, I could then free up other people just by being around them differently. So forgiveness is difficult. It's something that is difficult because our damage, our abuse, our trauma has impacted our brains, the way we're wired. There's studies around that. It's difficult because it takes a long time for people to get perspective and realize that we're not at fault, that as adults we can look back and see what happened differently. And it's also difficult because there may be this emotional trauma bond as well that keeps us kind of in denial from recognizing all the things that have happened, because it's real painful to recognize all that. And we'd rather revisit whatever memories of those people in a much nicer way. So it's the process of forgiveness is not just intellectual. There's a physical component. So I always find myself, having memories or different perspectives of things that I need to let go of when I'm doing something physical. Those memories are in me. There are triggers we've talked about in different modules. It's an intellectual process, having perspective, learning more about our own past, about the ways we've been impacted. It's emotional in that we still have many attachments to people, places, and that we don't want to let go of that are related to abuse. And it's a spiritual process, and all of this is spiritual work. But I'll say that as a spiritual process, it's really difficult and really critical that we recognize that part of our difficulty in forgiving is our need to trust that there is a big spiritual, that there's something beyond our particular experiences that have been so harmful. So that's a big deal too. We have to start to rethink what is this higher power, what is this infinite good in light of all this other past experience. And that's deep spiritual work. We'll talk about more of that in future modules. So unforgiveness hurts us. We carry stress. It impacts our bodies, impacts the way we make decisions. We're in this fight-flight mode for a long time. It impacts everything about us. We'll talk about that a little bit more when we talk about practical meditation. And we also attract a lot of negative things when we're holding on to this anxiety or this negative thinking. And so it's really important for us to recognize those things aren't good for us. So when we release ourselves from this destructive behavior patterns, we start attracting also other people. I've seen that in my own experience after cycles of why do I keep meeting the same people who are not the strong partners or the healthy partners to actually accomplish things I want to accomplish. So we do that. We have a part in that. And I've certainly met many survivors of extraordinary trauma who, Dr. Edie Eiger is one who danced for Mengele, who is an incredible angel. And her and so many others who have been through so much trauma are now in this place to saying, I'm freed of all that. I wouldn't trade any of that. All of that has made me the person who I am because I forgave. I let go of all that was holding me down in so much hatred and depression and all that kind of stuff. So it's important, it's critical, it's a big piece for you to work on. I invite you to join in the chat room and then through the workbook, and I'll meet you in the next module.